thank you once again for talking to us and talking to the nation and to the world, really, about different issues that come up in people's lives. And today we're going to talk about female sex addiction. Yeah. And, you know, there's been a lot of stigma placed on addiction. And in the last 10, 20 years, alcohol addiction, drug addiction has kind of come to the forefront. It's okay to talk about. Sexual addiction is one of those things that people really is still kind of taboo to talk about, especially female sex addiction. What is the difference between sex addiction and someone who just likes, they're hypersexual or they like to have a lot of sex, or where's that line?
Well, you know, Jerry, number one, I want to just to gratefully say that what you're helping me with and helping the universe with is to bring to the awareness a subject that is very sensitive and very untalked about. I mean, it's just something that everyone want to talk about, but everyone is so scared to even mention. And we have to bring it to the forefront for one reason, because we cannot heal anything unless we are aware of its presence. And a lot of people are suffering, and they can't even let you know. So the number of people who are suffering from anything related to addiction or hypersexuality, or what's the difference, or what it is huge. But the only reason we don't know is because it's just a stigma. It's a shame, very shameful. But we need to get one thing, and I'm really saying this with all my heart, unless we really take the stigma away and start treating humans, people, family. When every single person becomes my family, every single person becomes important to me, then his addiction or sex addiction or whatever addiction is becomes this focus, because it's about them. So you bring in sex addiction to the forefront and having a whole segment on sex addiction. I really congratulate you for that.
Thank you.
We
appreciate your knowledge and your wisdom in this arena, and being able to, you have a clinic where you help people with addiction.
Yeah, I do.
You're very well known for that.
Yes.
And being able to share some of this information, like you said, the first thing is, of course, making the subject not taboo.
Absolutely.
So that people can discuss it, because there's no way to heal without discussing the problem.
Absolutely.
Or the issue. But what is the difference between sex addiction and just someone who likes a lot of sex or this hypersexual?
You know, I love your question. This is a great question. Any time your brain is under the influence of any kind of addiction, whether it's sexual or not, your brain is hijacked. You are driven toward danger, knowingly, not prepared, but because you can't stop. You're totally hijacked. You have no control, because you have, and when that beautiful relationship, which is a great sexuality, turns into a nightmare, when you have an act after which you feel shameful, after which you felt bad, after which you felt guilty, then it really becomes something that you have no control over. And that's really describes what addiction is. The other thing about addiction is, if you cannot stop it without withdrawal symptoms, without suffering, without consequences. And if you don't, and another criteria that makes it becomes an addiction versus a normal sexuality or a hypersexuality is you crave it. And you have anguish for it. And you can't have enough because you're driven to destruction. So sex is meant to be health. Sex is meant to be love. Sex is meant to be procreation. Sex is to be intimacy. Any disruption in that beautiful cycle and harmony, when you become driven, when you lose control, when you can't let even your intimate person know about it, because it becomes a secret. If it becomes a secret, and if you have guilt, and if you can't sleep because of it, then it becomes an addiction. So that is happening. That is happening every day.
There are people who are more sexually active than others. Like in men, maybe they have more testosterone. I guess women have testosterone too.
Absolutely.
And maybe people have different flow rates of their hormones, or they're just more sexual. But when it crosses the line into addiction, that's when you're saying that's when it's really uncontrollable at that point. You crave it and you go after it, and you can't stop yourself,
regardless
no
of
matter
the
what
consequences.
it hurts.
Right.
During the act of having sex, your brain's firing. The great chemical factory that we have, the brain, is firing off a lot of different chemicals, and especially during an orgasm. And I've read that there's 6 or more chemicals that fire off during that time. I think it's about the most intense feeling that your body can get naturally. I guess you could include pain in that, but the most intense pleasurable feeling that you can get is the act of the orgasm. And so your brain must just fire off a massive amount of chemicals. That's a question.
Yeah. Well, if we want to talk about the brain is a beautiful conducting symphony. It's a beautiful symphony that is happening, and it's a play of many hormones, and they're just in harmony. And if each one of them has a particular role, but the funny thing is that most of us think that most of these neurotransmitters, because there's a difference between neurotransmitters and hormone, and we'll get to this because both are very important in that situation. But there's one thing that most of us do not realize. The neurotransmitters, which are the chemicals that some of us are the happy chemicals or the dulling chemicals like opiate chemicals and all that, these are not only made in the brain. There is one more place where you create tons of these chemicals, and that's the gut. You remember everybody keep gut feeling? I have gut feelings. Why do you have gut feelings? Because you are creating a very similar symphony of hormones in your gut. So you are producing serotonin in your gut. You produce also GABA in your gut. You also make, a lot of sometimes glutamine and glutamate in your gut. So it's a symphony between the gut and the brain. It's an axis. So that influence each other. They do influence one another. So a lot of the times, even when you have that heightened feeling of I feel good, and the highest feeling of feeling good is during a sexual orgasm. And that's really meant for us to really continuation of life. That's part of protection and continuation of life and survivorship. Now there's one bad hormone that really causes dysfunction in this music, and it's cacophony kind of, and that's cortisol. And cortisol is the hormone that is immediately produced when you are under a fight or flight response. So you're having concerns, fear. That's why a lot of addiction have to do with that adrenal gland and the ACTH, which is produced in the adrenal gland and the hypothalamus as well. So there is a communication that is happening continuously between the brain and the kidneys and the adrenals. And when you're under attack, you are firing a lot of things. And that's when you're depleting your neurotransmitters up there, because you're stealing away the amino acids that are necessary for production of dopamine. So when you have a problem at that level and your dopamine level is low, you need highs. What causes deprivation of dopamine in your body is a trauma, is fear, is anger. So if you want to raise your dopamine level, you have to have a sexual act, because that's the only way you're now producing dopamine.
Now, does the dopamine, does it stop when the cortisol gets so strong, and vice versa? Does the cortisol recede, or does the dopamine become so powerful that it overcomes the cortisol that's still being produced?
When you're having sex or you're in a very intimate relationship, your cortisol level is down. It's a good thing. But people who have low dopamine, as we talked about before, they have what we call the dopamine deficiency syndrome, when they have no dopamine. They need that high to survive. And a lot of times, just being hypersexual or actually sex addicts is the only way they can make that the reward system start generating enough dopamine to make you feel good. So a lot of times, people who have experienced addiction of sex are trying to self-medicate, but instead of saying self-medicate, self-create.
You're creating the medication inside yourself.
Right. You self-medicate in a different way. That's, we call that behavioral addiction. That's like gambling, like food addiction. So sex addiction, food addiction, sexting, digital addiction, all these are part of the behavioral addictions. So you're not addicted to a chemical that is a drug, but you're addicted to the feeling. Okay, so a lot of these people, instead of having that beautiful feeling of intimacy, now they have to do it because otherwise they cannot survive. Because their dopamine level is down. Mm-hmm. So let me just explain one more thing. So if you're under a lot of stress, if you're under a tremendous amount of stress, your cortisol level is up. When your cortisol level is up, it gives signal to a gland up here. It's the master gland. It's called hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus starts making another hormone. It's called CRF. That CRF is cortisol releasing hormone, because you need more cortisol because you're under stress. When you create cortisol releasing hormone, that increases and intensifies the cravings.
So you're saying the more cortisol that's being produced in your body, which many times is produced because of stress or pain, you're saying that
steals away.
It steals away
the amino acid L-tyrosine.
Okay.
And makes it go into a pathway called epinephrine and norepinephrine that is really the fight and flight response, not really the cortisol, that norepinephrine and epinephrine. So instead of creating dopamine, that same molecule, which is that same amino acid that is creating dopamine, is stolen away from the dopamine pathway, and it goes into a fight and flight response. You have fear, you're anxious, you're nervous. You have no dopamine. So you just run to get some dopamine because it's the elixir of life.
The people who have the higher cortisol production in their bodies, is there a correlation between that and like what we're talking about here is addiction to sex? Is there a correlation between that?
Absolutely. It's one of the factors. I mean, I want to make sure that everybody understands that addiction is a very complex disease. There's a lot of elements involved.
Right.
Some of it are psychological traumas. Some of it are experience and when it was happening. And some of it has to do with drugs, because a lot of the addictions they live in harmony together. So you start with sugar, then you go to the cigarettes, then you go to the marijuana, and it's just a progression that way. So it's all part of one family of enslaving your brain. And the sooner you become exposed to sex, if you will, like there's a lot of stuff on TV now that when I was growing up was not even present. So we are more permissive, so children venture earlier. They venture when the prefrontal cortex is not developed enough yet. It's not mature yet. Mostly for men, it's not mature. And then they are now experimenting with things. They raise their need for dopamine, because most of us are satisfied with a certain level of dopamine, but now you have raised the level of dopamine that is necessary for you to survive. So you cannot achieve satisfaction except with more and more and more and more. Because the first time is the time that you get the biggest satisfaction ever. And the next time you strive for the next one. And you hope that the next one is going to be better, but it's not.
Right. Well, I might contradict you there with the sexual part. If you come across the good partner, right, later down the road. You know, you were talking about exposure. When I was a kid, the best we could hope for is to find a Playboy in the ditch that someone threw out because their wife would get mad if it came into the house. It was a different culture, different time. Things were not as accepted as they are now in that realm. So we would get a look, you know, 9, 10, 11, 12. You'd look at a Playboy, you'd see not completely nude, but almost.
Right.
Today's children, at age 7, 8, 9, if they can get on the computer and no one's watching, everything's out there. They're exposed to so much.
Absolutely.
Their brains are being hardwired.
Absolutely.
Does this cause a problem of desensitization or a fact that, like you said about the dopamine, they've already experienced highs when their brains aren't hardwired to experience these highs, and then they have to achieve a new level?
More for women, it's a little different than for men, because for women, really there's a huge problem. Most of these women have experienced some kind of pain and trauma, and they're trying to avoid that. They also have issues with self-esteem. They've been either molested by a very dear father or a dear family member, somebody that they trusted. So it's just a very hard thing. For some of them have just some sexual trauma, or they've seen a scene of somebody they love, a mother with somebody else, and in a place where, I mean, these kids are very sensitized. So these women could be also women who don't feel good about themselves. They may have disrespect for who they are, and people bully them all the time. You know, you're an obese, you're fat, you're ugly, you're who are you? So they really have to feel God somewhere, and they have to avoid pain. So when they begin, there is comfort that happens immediately after a sexual encounter, because there's a hormone called oxytocin that is made there. And the role of oxytocin is to really make you rest. So sex is really supposed to help you rest and sleep comfortably so that you can restore. So it puts you in a parasympathetic mode. So these people are just so anxious and so nervous, and they need something to calm them down. And a lot of time, that feeling bad, they want to try to avoid it by all means. So the only way they can get it is through, you know, having some sexual experience. But that sexual experience at times is not human to human. There's so much else happening. There's a newer digital exposure, sexting. People can talk to other people on the phone, and they make them feel the same way. Pornography, you know, children pornography. There's a lot more to that field of sexuality that is undercover. And it's making a lot of money, but we're not helping people. We need to get it out. We need to be able to talk to our children about it, because now they're exposed. Right. We also need to love them and forgive them. We need to tell them there's hope. We need to show them that we can help them. Because once they know that there's a symphony between the amino acids and neurotransmitters, a symphony between the hormone and estrogen and testosterone, a history between the cortisol, if you know that you can restore some of these, and re-nourish the brain with the chemicals that is missing without using drugs. You're helping these people. But it's hope is the key. Today, maybe we need to talk about sex addiction again. But today, the main thing we want to do is allow people to come forward and know there is help for them. That we are here to help them through our program, through coming to our clinics, through our, the awareness that you're bringing to the table, to tell them we're here for them. They're hurting. We know they're hurting.
You mentioned pornography. Some will make the case that it's healthy. Some make the case that it's not healthy. And I guess that would be to the individual person itself and them enjoying that with their mate or without. Does pornography, it's readily available anywhere you go, where it used to be hard to come by, like we just talked about, prior to the invention of the VHS, really.
Right.
You had to go somewhere specifically to see it or some other way. I was reading some polls, and they varied greatly, but I took the middle of the road. I took the average. And it said that 33% a little over 50% of women between the ages of 18 and 55 watch pornography on the computer. Mm-hmm. Around 33% watch it once a week for at least 15 minutes. Now, this is gathered off IP addresses, so it's pretty scientific data, as long as the end user is who they say they are. Mm-hmm. Is this it seems like to me from when I grew up, unless it was extremely hidden, that this is a big shift.
Yes.
And in this shift, has it correlated with the amount of sexual addiction in females?
Well, there's several things about why sex addiction in females is also becoming more. Awareness is another thing. Women now are able to say, we are, or we can be. So there is more freedom for women to not fear to say what their problems are. So there's more awareness, there is more power for women that they can come forward and say, I have a problem. But there is some things that, there's a question you asked me about pornography. Again, whether it's pornography or, unless it's something really that we're going to talk about, anything that you could do that does not control you, that you can stop when you want to, when you are not driven to it while you're in the office working on in an office, and you're supposed to be giving a project, and then you can't even get away. And when it hijacks the brain, when you can't stop it, when you, regardless of the consequences, no matter what it is, no matter what people think is normal or not normal, when it becomes beyond what is acceptable for you to be able to maintain a healthy living, is no longer just a normal thing. It's not normal to be driven. It's not normal to be enslaved. It's not normal to sweat if you don't get it. It just means something is missing, and you have to get it some other way, because your brain is hijacked. Because an executive brain would tell you, hey, you're at the office. You're working and you're getting paid. You can't watch pornography, right. Okay? And if it's tied with one thing and then it shifts to child pornography, then the next thing is sexting. And then it's a much bigger thing. And unless we allow people to come forth and say, I have a problem, we're not going to even be able to know the extent of the problem.
We've discussed before addiction with drugs.
Absolutely.
Like heroin, that sort of thing. And as you stated, they never get the same high that when they first shoot, and they search for that high, and that's why a lot of people OD, I guess. Mm-hmm. When we're talking about female sex addiction, I can't speak for a female, but I can speak for a male. Mm-hmm. When we were just talking about the feeling that you get, the euphoria that you get when you do orgasm. Can people be addicted to that feeling to a point to where that feeling is just like shooting up or whatever to get a high, that they go after it more and more and more? Can that be an addiction, or is that just hypersexuality?
Again, if you cannot stop it at demand, it's not an on-demand thing. If you have no control over it, it's addiction. If you have control over it, it's not addiction, it's hypersexuality. The thing is that the feeling good thing is not the only thing that women need. Women need love. But also there's one thing that we forgot. There's two things that have impacted women's sexuality. One is the sex revolution, when women, they were able to overcome and just discuss about feminism and all of that, and that era give women the power to be able to feel we're equal, we're present, we're here. Now beyond that, there's something bigger than that happened. Now I know there's a lot of people who think there's an equality in men and women positions. That's really kind of true and not true. There's a lot of executive women now. There are a lot of women in a very high ranking and power. Actually, we're having a president that's going to be a possible president that is a female. So women are getting more powerful position. And when you're in a powerful position, you allow yourself to do what most of the executive people had done, and it was accepted. So women are giving themselves permission to have extramarital relationship because of their high position. So at times, that is one of the reasons why sexuality in women have been more pronounced. But also, it's an evolution and it's a revolution, because now the children are talking about sexuality a lot earlier than we have, and things are changing. I mean, it's just everywhere. It's just in school and this and that. We talk condom. There's so much happening where sexuality is talked about, but not talked about with the right people. And people don't even spend time helping people understand how they feel. They're exposed. Some girls could be bullied into having a relationship, and then they feel horrible, and that's the only way they can feel good. So, because the reward system is really what makes a whole difference for our survivorship. You have to survive, and the only way you can survive is you have a reward system. The reward system says everything is okay. And at times, when you continuously abuse the system, you turn off the receptors and you reset your dopamine need to a much higher level. So the highest level of dopamine would have been with a sexual encounter. And now you have pushed it higher. So you need a lot more to even survive. So what we need to do is to really get it back to a balance somewhere again. You got to feel balance. But balance starts from the inside out. So you need to restore the whole thing. You need to realize that the guts is part of the neurotransmitter system. It's part of the nervous system. So talking to people about how to restore their gut, eating the right way, start loving themselves, start really realizing there's hope, starting to be able to know that we're here for them and we're going to work through the shame and the guilt. And there is some medications that have helped people, and because they block some different receptors, but also nurturing the receptors again, nurturing the person again, nurturing receptors that are dopamine receptors that now have been turned in because they cannot take that much dopamine, so they turn in. So you don't even have receptors anymore. So you make the receptors unsensitive. They're desensitized. So you need a lot more dopamine in order for you to really sensitize those receptors. So it's more complex, and it needs restoration of the entire body, spirit, mind, body, physical, eating, exercising, self-love, self-esteem. It's a very complex thing, but it begins with one thing, is awareness. It begins with one thing, is I can talk to someone and I can be respected and loved no matter what I've done. Because there's shame that kills people, that shame that will give them cancer, that shame and guilt that'll destroy their family relationship. They've got to forgive themselves, and we have to forgive them. And it's hard, because you have a spouse that now is involved, or a partner, there's, people have sexual preferences. So partners may be involved and upset and scared. And it just, any addiction destroys the entire fabric of our being, our family, our society. And the more hidden it stays, the more problems we'll have, because it's boiling under the surface.
Well, you had mentioned something a minute ago, or a few minutes ago, about that, we were talking about the euphoria, the brain kicks off chemicals. You said the gut kicks off, your gut. Mm. It's actually, you're talking about your stomach area?
The whole thing.
The whole thing?
The GI system.
So it matters what you eat.
Absolutely.
In helping to restore a natural, normal...
protein, high protein diet, good healthy protein diet, but also understanding gastrointestinal health. Because you can eat the best protein, but you're not digesting it. Not only are you not digesting, but you're not even absorbing it. So if you have blockage at digestion, blockage at absorption, constipation issues, or if you are, there's another biggest problem. If you are thinking you're eating proteins when you get a protein bar, you're mistaken. Because these protein bars are loaded with amino acids that have nothing to do with our body, and they're just nothing that is going to give us the building blocks that are necessary for your neurotransmitter to be made. It's the opposite. You'll have amino acid that turn into sugar in your body. So you can ask yourself a lot of time, you're very tired, you're very hungry, you're very angry, you're very upset. You just have a piece of bread and you calm down like, wow, I'm fine. And you don't even know why you're rested. Well, because you have created a lot of serotonin, you have a lot of GABA that's come in, but there's another thing that most people don't know. There is family that lives with us. And we have always ignored them, those critters. They call those flora, normal stomach flora, which some people call it bacteria, or some people call it probiotics, we call it probiotics for life, but these are critters. They live with us. Now, these critters are not just in your gut. Those critters are everywhere in your body. But we are exposed to so much chemicals that have destroyed the good critters. The critters that help us to have the GABA, the critters that help us to have the tryptophan and change it into serotonin. These critters are part of a family. They're with us, they live with us. Their genetic is messed up with our genes. Their DNA is part of our DNA. They're part of us. And we have destroyed them by all the toxins we're exposed to. So really restoring any addiction, whether it's sexual, gambling, you've got to really look at the entire body. And it begins with the spirit. And spirituality for me is really not just religion, because I respect everybody's religion. I have my own, and I love it. But it's that vertical relationship with you and your Creator, you and your universe, that is really essential. We have always paid attention to that horizontal relationship, but it ties us down. And that's what religions do, which is great. It just grounds us. But we need to elevate. And the elevation gives us freedom, because we start loving us, we start forgiving us, we We start thinking we're worth it. We change our core belief of not deserving into we're deserving, we're good. I deserve better than any man to just have sex with, or any woman that I have sex with. I deserve the best. But we don't think you're deserving. You get whatever you get because you want to replenish what's missing. And what's missing is not just here, it's here. So replenish the void. Let's open the subject. Let's learn from one another. Let's help people to live again. We're pro-life. Pro-life is not just for newborns. Pro-life is every life, all lives. Help these people just look at every candidate we had. I mean, everyone had someone die from addiction. We had a former president that have some sex addiction issues. I mean, people have suffered these, and we alienate them, we disrespect them, we make fun of them, but we all have them. So it's good to really allow these people to come forth. Let's help them to heal with restoring the amino acids, restoring the hormones. If you have too much testosterone as a woman, and you're just getting testosterone from whatever reason, if you have ovarian dysfunction.
Well, you talk about testosterone. If a female does have more testosterone than normal, does that cause a female to be more sexual?
Absolutely.
Or the opposite?
Absolutely more sexual.
Okay.
Men, if they have too much estrogen, they become less sexual.
Right.
It's the opposite. Testosterone is the hormone that makes people more hypersexual. And very hardworking women have higher testosterone no matter what you tell me, because they're making a lot more testosterone. Because, as I told you before, in the cascade of formation, testosterone is made first. Then it becomes estrogen. And hardworking women don't have enough fat because they're working, they're administrative, they have to look at their figure. And the estrogen factory is your obesity, your fat. So a lot of these women who are in high position and high power are a little hypersexual because they don't, estrogen is made in different ways. It's also made from the estrogens, but from the ovaries. But you also have another factory that people don't know about. And constipation increases your estrogen level. Why? Because there is something called enterohepatic circulation. It means, your whatever estrogen is made, it goes through the bowel, and if you're constipated, it's reabsorbed back. So you have hyperestrogenemia. So hormonal imbalances is a massive issue. We never pay attention to that. So a lot of these women need a hormonal assessment, and a lot of these men need a hormonal assessment.
With the sexual addiction, it's always kind of been a running joke. Young men, they're going after the tail. They want an old adage that I've heard is, if you go to the deep primal being, is that men's goal is to spread as much seed as possible for procreation. With women, I'm not sure that that's the case. It's more about meeting someone who's a mate for protection. We're going back in time, way back in time. Mm-hmm. And so there was different drive for each side sexually. We've all heard the saying that, women give sex for love, men give love for sex. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be changing to where women are more hypersexual, some of them, and going into the addiction side. With other addictions, I always know it's been stated that you have to first identify that you have a problem. Mm-hmm. How is that going to be done with a female? Say she doesn't know whether she has a problem or not. She has multiple sexual partners, this and that. She's partying every night. At what point, or how could you help to explain to someone it's time to take a self-analysis, look at what you're doing, and realize that you may have a problem or it's just a healthy sexual lifestyle?
Well, it's really, honestly simple. When you, after every encounter, you feel shameful, You feel guilty. You lose weight. You're nervous. You're anxious. You can't stop. It's affecting your husband, your spouse, your children, your work. If this is the only thing on your mind, you need help. But
what if a female just loves it?
I mean, loves it is one thing, and being addicted is another thing. If you love something, you cannot do it at work.
Right.
You cannot do it when your baby is crying for food, because that's not a woman nature. Okay, you can't be leaving your child in front of you, and you just can't stop yourself. When you become a slave, you know you're a slave. The thing is that it's not talked about. It's not seen. They suffer alone.
Are there some women that are addicted to sex that search out pornography the same way men do to try to satisfy that whatever need it is? Or is it different for females than it is males? Where males is more visual, and you know you've stated that for females it's more about well, not more about, but a lot of it is about being loved. And so I don't know how pornography would feel that. How would pornography fulfill that need?
You know, there's a lot of ways. You know, what they need is not the pornography, it's just the feel good of the dopamine, okay? Watching somebody else is having a good time. So that's really making you be part of the good time thing. It makes you, we're creatures of community. So we're feeling, when watching this, you're in a community, and you now, everything is digital, so your community is whoever is your gathering online. So you're part of a community now. You're part of a community you may not even talk to them. And who knows, eventually you may have a community that is on Skyping. You never know. I mean, it's just getting to a point where pornography is using technology as well. So you feel I am within people and we're all having a good time. But after you finish that feeling, you feel bad. You feel guilty. You did not cook. Your home is dirty. You're not making money. You're losing your husband. You're losing your brain. You're anxious. You're nervous. The thing is that they don't know that there is hope. They suffer alone. They don't know that someone is here to listen. They don't know that it's acceptable. They don't even know it's an addiction. They know they can't stop. But nobody is even want to call it anything.
Because it's taboo.
Yeah, I mean
society views it as being taboo, especially for females.
For females. I mean, you can't say, okay, I'm a hypersexual. I mean, you can say I'm hypersexual, but you can't say I'm an addict. Okay? Even for male sexual addiction, most of them are caught in like our president, I mean, the former president. It's not that they want to come forth and say, hey, I have a problem. They don't. I mean,
in their mind, it's not a problem.
I mean,
it's just,
at times they do think it's not a problem, but if they have guilt, if they have secrecy, if they cannot tell anybody else about it, if they feel fear inside, it means they need help. Now, a lot of the help has to come from realizing what the problem was. Second is, you need help. You need a community to help you. You need somebody to restore your neurotransmitters. You need someone to make sure your hormones are not off. Make sure your cortisol level is not too high. Make sure your GI is not dysbiotic. Make sure that everything around you don't have a lot of toxins. It's a whole spectrum of things. But first of all, it's not just admitting I'm an addict. It's knowing I can talk to someone. Because it has to come to awareness before you can admit it. You have to know it's there. You have to know it's another addiction that is present so that we seek help for it. It's one more addiction where we need to really remove the stigma, so that we can get people back for healing, for help, for restoration.
Well, that was going to be my next question, which you
Yeah.
kind of already have answered. Is there, where there was always hope as long as there's another day.
Absolutely.
Is there help for people who have this overpowering drive or this sexual addiction? And what's the first step? What steps should they take if they feel they do have a problem? So, because like you said, there is a stigma, I suppose, especially for a female.
Yeah.
What do they do?
Number one, they can contact us, and you and I will have these, we may have even a program once a week, only on women who wants to discuss, and they can be anonymous. But we can answer their questions. We can help them that way. And if they feel like we're helping them, they can come to our office and we can help them. But we need to go beyond that. Once we know that there is a need for it, as much as I know it is, then we start teaching physicians on how to really be proactive and recognize this before it even becomes to a stage that is uncontrollable. Because addictions are predictable in many ways. And if anybody has issues with addiction, everybody knows, because now they're withdrawn. Now they don't want to be around people. Now they're changing. There's a change in behavior. Used to come every day at a certain time. Now if you come a little bit late one time, you start becoming not only proactive, but sensitive to people. And say, what's wrong with this lady? What's wrong with that man? What's wrong with this person? And is it masturbation? Is it pornography? Is it sexting? What is it? And where can we stop? And where can we change the community? Because if we're on the digital community, we're not getting help. We need to have good blogs where people can talk freely without stigma, but monitored by a doctor or someone, or a psychiatrist or psychologist, someone who can help them. Because we don't want to create a pornography room in a forum that is really help to heal people.
Right.
But allow them to really express their feelings. Allow them to say what they feel. Tell them there's imaging that we could do to the brain to see what's happening. And it could be infection. Inflammation to the brain causes addiction. Lack of good fats causes excitation. I mean, you've got to restore lots of chemicals in the brain. But people need to discuss their issues.
Right.
We need to start being open to say, there's a forum, there's no judgment, and we can get more studies because people are talking. I mean, we can do functional MRIs, and we'll see what parts of the brain are lit. Then check if there's inflammation, because the inflammatory process are excitatory. When you're inflamed, you make a lot of glutamate. When when the glutamate level is very high, your brain is on fire. You got to dampen the brain. So you need more oxytocin sometimes, which is one of the hormones that happens with orgasm. So we need to really, it's a whole comprehensive program, and we have a system. We have a diagnostic part to it that includes a great history, some lab, some functional MRIs, hormonal evaluation, adrenal evaluation, neurotransmitters evaluation in the urine, then restoration. Starts with self-love. Naltrexone is opiate blocker that has been used successfully in some people who have hyper issues with it. But honestly, I do offer substitutions, but I also have to work on their healing from the inside out. Because once the substitution is gone, you got to really find the root cause. Is it a trauma? Is it your critters that are not right? Is it you have too much testosterone? Is it your estrogen's off whack? Is it you have no progesterone? Or is it your neurotransmitter are off? What's going on? Have you been raped? Are you just an executive who wants to really, feel the power, and then you're just now trapped? Are you trapped? Are you blocked? But where can you address these unless you discuss it openly?
Your clinic takes an extremely multifaceted approach to this.
Absolutely.
To try to encapsulate the entire issue,
Being.
and so that you can diagnose it properly, both physically, mentally, and somewhat spiritually.
Absolutely.
Am I correct?
I mean, in the spirituality, again, I don't tackle people's religion. That's their religion.
The spirituality and religion are different. They're very different.
That's the horizontal and the vertical.
Right.
And I just help them to build that vertical relationship.
And there are some people who are spiritually in nature, just with nature.
Absolutely. Nature is the best place where spirituality is.
So it doesn't really, I know that, I just want to make sure that everybody knows you're not going to push any style of religion. Or it's, when I say spirituality, I mean that in a big realm, not just a religion.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I want to say one more thing, and I honestly, again, appreciate you with all my heart. This is not a commercial about Dr. Akoury. I want to make sure that everybody in the world knows that. I want that awareness to come. And I want doctors to learn. And I want counselors to be involved. I want all of us to work together to create a healing sanctuary for every single person who is suffering from the dis-ease of addiction. Because so many people are dying every day, and they're stigmatized because now they become the one who steals, the thief, the crime, the criminal. And when you have sex addiction, you may even become, a child sex addict, and because it's just whatever you can get. So it has implications. We've seen teachers who have addressed children. I mean, we've seen even
a lot of female teachers recently
unfortunately,
in the news, like 23, 24, 25, 26, are having sex with 14, 15, 16-year-old males.
It really, it's infiltrating everywhere. But these people also suffer, but the consequences of their suffering is killing others because they have created another traumatized person. So it's just not happening. And it's not just the Catholic priest or whatever, it's everywhere. Who you know. You don't even know if you're the child at home and you have a nanny for. You don't even want to, you want to know. You want to make sure that the nanny is healed. You want to make sure that all of us are here to help.
Well, I appreciate what you said about this isn't a commercial for Dr. Akoury, but I also want to state the reason that we talk to you is because you're at the top of the field. And whenever there's an issue in life, whether it's with your automobile, you go to the best mechanic. You want the best advice. You need your air conditioning repaired, you go to the best HVAC person. And we are experiencing almost a pandemic in addiction.
It is.
And it's across the board, whether it's gambling, alcohol, drugs, sex, whatever it is, it seems to be growing at a rapid rate. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is to, one, is let people know that there is some help. There's help out there.
Absolutely.
You don't have to suffer alone.
Absolutely.
And you can heal yourself with help. And so we want to talk to someone who's at the forefront.
Absolutely.
And I've said this before. I've known you for years, and you're always ahead of the curve, which sometimes you pay a price for. You pay a price when you're ahead of the curve that far.
Oh, God, help me.
But you are. And I think that your ability to help people live a very healthy, functional life, be it with addiction, proper diets, exercise, just the whole self, the whole
being.
Yes.
I mean, we want to restore us all to whole being. And, I admire you as well. It's a mutual admiration because you have a mission, and I have a mission, and we want to help everyone around us. And honestly, it's just because it's needed.
Yes.
And it's because nobody else is talking about it. And there's people suffering and people in pain. And we can't let people in pain when we have answers. And one of the answers is you bringing this to the forefront. It's not an easy subject to bring to the forefront. I mean, you also are sticking out. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy thing. Okay, we're bringing something that is very uncustomary. We're bringing something that is very hard to even discuss. You may have viewers that are, couples that are listening to this, and it scares them. But we want to tell them, no, don't be scared. Let's support one another. Let's heal that being. Because otherwise they're going to explode. They're going to develop cancer. They're going to fail you. They're going to fail themselves. I mean, when I fail everybody, it's not as hard as I failed me. When you fail you lost it all. When you fail others, you lose. But when you fail you, that's the biggest pain that you can ever suffer from. It's time for you to say, I need help. I need to eat right. I need to love. I need to live. Because love is live.
There's another issue that you just brought up. A lot of people will never say, I need love.
They do.
But it's who we are. It's what our being is.
Yeah.
We have to have that in our life.
Absolutely.
And people who don't have it in their life have a lot of complications.
They're desperate.
But, in that realm, I will tell you, men, women, they don't, women talk about it, I think, a little bit more, but men don't, but they need it.
Absolutely.
They need it, and it's a part of creating the whole being.
It's the whole being.
And to live, like you said, a healthier, more functional life, it's why we're here. Mm-hmm. And some of us are on missions. But it is about, I think our mission is the same in the fact that we want to see better for our society.
Yes.
We want to see better for our we used to say fellow man, now we say a fellow person, but it was all the same, it's whether it's male or female. And make sure that people know that there's help out there with clinics like yours.
Yes.
And
so
we're
going to have many, many more of these clinics everywhere where people are really compassionate.
So you don't have to suffer.
Compassionate and love and care and want to give back because we want to. Otherwise, we're going to lose our children. We don't know who the next one who's suffering. It may be somebody dear to us. So we really need to create a community of forgivers, lovers, givers, and giving love and giving life back.
Well, thank you once again.
What a pleasure.
For your time.
Thank you so much.